April the 12th, 2026. Guys, a lot's been going on this weekend. We saw late last night or early this morning, after 21 hours of negotiations, that Vance came up, said they're headed back home. They couldn't make the agreement. And he said something that put a bug in my ear, and it didn't quite make sense. He said the sticking point was that the Iranians refused to give up their nuclear capabilities or their ambitions to build back their nuclear stuff. And so, well, that's one thing. But then Trump came out, and this is really where the focus started. And he said this morning that we're putting a blockade at the Strait. The U.S. Navy is, and we got 4 big groups there right now. And most of them just came back from Diego Garcia, guys, fully rearming because our ships were getting low on munitions. So this 2 or 3 days of treaty allowed them to ease out into the Indian Ocean to Diego Garcia and fully reload. And Trump said that these are newer type weapons. But why is it all coming together? Because again, once the straits open, that was kind of one of the main sticking points until today. And, but he's closing them again. But the U.S. is using the excuse, and it is a valid excuse, especially for the Middle East, that they refuse to again do much negotiation on the nuclear side of this whole deal. So how does that come together? We haven't really been told the truth because a lot of people aren't realizing how far back into the chess game this thing goes. We talked about this last night, that the straits were empty. We had hundreds of VLCs, which are very large cargo vessels, empty, coming to the Gulf of America. And some of those ships, guys, are the largest in the world. And so we saw that as part of the chess move. The straits were not pumping any oil. The U.S. is about to get a lot of business, guys. And if you think about it, the ships average 2 million barrels. Right now, your oil is up to close to $100 a barrel. We'll use 100 for an average. So that's $200 million worth of cargo on each ship. You understand what I'm saying? And I think the report last night was like 362. Not sure if it's changed. More than likely it has, because people are going to realize where the business is going. And so what it looks like to me is that was part of it, but why the blockade? They're saying because of the nuke thing, but it's to stop any vessel from coming out of the Gulf of Persia, or the Persian Gulf, that has paid a toll to Iran. Why is that? And that's what I wanted to start digging into. How would that tie back into everything? It's because even Saudi Arabia, on the other side of the Persian Gulf, takes payments in the petrol-yuan. Both. And so this is how the ships that were going to be coming out, giving $1 million per ship to Iran, was going to pay. They were going to pay with the petrol-yuan, or the petro-won. And it's a battle now. It's been obvious. We just didn't see it as clearly as we are now. The fact is, this is a battle to keep the U.S. petrodollar in place. The whole thing is nothing but that. And you got the BRICS meeting coming up in India in a few months. And that is a meeting about getting people off the petrodollar and going into different, like the petro-won, some of the digital currencies and things like that, and get away from the power of the petrodollar. And Trump says, if you come out of the straits and you've paid, more than likely, we're going to tell you to turn around, go back and get your money, and come back out, and we'll see how it goes from there. That's almost verbatim. And so he doesn't want to allow these ships out of there after giving Iran the money in the petro-yuan and let the petrodollar die and its worldwide influence. It's very deep. But people have been talking about that for a long time. And with the BRICS, that's really one of the reasons it was formed and other things. So how will that affect the relationship in the next few months between the U.S. and India and the other nations that are involved, China, Russia? But it is a battle of currencies to maintain the global control. And so now it starts to make sense. Trump pulls out and or lets them do a peace deal. He gets his ships down into Diego Garcia with brand new, really restocked completely with even newer weapons, more powerful than we've seen, he said, and coming back there. Is it to attack Iran? Or is it strictly to enforce the blockade there? The whole thing is about Iran, about Saudi Arabia, guys, because they're a part of this movement away from the petrodollar. They're trying to walk a very tightrope between the U.S. and the rest of the world because they know that it's the smartest thing to do right now. Because without oil, they have nothing, And so they've got, and without the trade of oil, their ability to do this, they have nothing. Many of the nations there are the same way, Saudi, UAE, all of those. And they have been moving to the Chinese yuan, the petro-yuan, to get away from, again, the control of our petrodollar. So it's about the petrodollar, not much else if it gets right down to it. Now, why is it so popular and why is it not being talked about? One thing is if you look, and I looked at the profits from the major oil companies, and this is called pure profit from what they were making when oil was in the 60-something dollars per barrel range. Now at the 100 range, they have what's called 30% pure profit. That has increased without increasing the U.S. cost of getting it all together, refining it, drilling it, all that. That hasn't increased. Our prices at the pumps have, and and if you think about it, with the petrodollar being tied worldwide, that's why our gas goes up when we don't need the gas from the Middle East. But to unbuckle from that, uncouple from the petrodollar by the U.S. itself, we have too much money loaned out. There's too many bonds and things that we rely on because the U.S. government's inability to control a budget has us in a bad bind. In other words, if you lose the petrodollar, then where are the loans going to be sold off to very quickly? What's going to happen to the U.S.'s credit stability? You understand? And the power, but that is the power. With the petrodollar, they've had over the years blockades in many places, embargoes set with places like Cuba and other places, Venezuela. And so if you control the oil in Venezuela, like we do now, and we don't know what's going to happen in the Middle East, that may be part of the hook. Will the Middle East start turning against Trump in the blockade because of him not wanting them to promote the petro-yuan? Think about it. And so what kind of conflict will that raise? Again, it was not just Iranian ships that were dealing in the petro-yuan, and it was also the other side, those Saudi nations on that side of the Gulf of Persia. So it was about to collapse. I think the petrodollar, because of things like our Federal Reserve won't lower interest rates, which keeps our debt increasing very, very substantially per day. And everything's coming to a head financially and economically for the U.S. So this move goes deeper than just a war for nukes or to protect Israel. Okay? It's all about the oil. It's about the petrodollar because we have oil. And what I have noticed looking into it today and going back since Trump came into office is suddenly we're building a lot of refineries. They're getting some big ones online right now, some of them in open water, because some of these big ships, and it gets so crowded in places like Houston and other places that to get the oil ashore, sometimes they have to offload. And there's not enough of those places. And so it's going to be a big choking point. All those ships coming in to load the fuel, we got to get them. We got to get the oil refined or whatever aboard the ships. And it's a big choke point now. And we've had a couple of refinery fires, things like that lately that look kind of suspicious. But so right now, Louisiana, what's that big one called? They're building off of your coast. And it's a big offshore pumping station, basically, so the big ships can come in and out quickly. It's not where a lot of the times you'll see in this case, smaller ships are taking on the oil from the big tankers and then bringing that ashore because they run much shallower. And then at night, places like in Houston, in the Galveston area, in Bay City, they don't allow much night traffic because it's kind of hazardous coming in there. They prefer to get the big ships in the daytime. So there's another bottleneck. So we're starting to see that. We're starting to see movement also with, in Alberta, Canada, where they're trying to get away from the libtarded crap of their government. And that's a lot of pipelines in that area. I'm talking about drilling in Alaska and other things. In other words, what the race started without us even getting into the petrodollar side of it was when Trump got back into office, the drill baby drill. He knew this was coming. He knew to build the military up quickly. Why? You're seeing it. To protect the U.S.'s status as the head of the currency situation. But tying in all the things that are being done now, new drilling, offshore capabilities, and onshore refinery capabilities. So all of these movements were pre-planned perfectly. When he says he's a businessman, believe him. Okay? Believe him. Now, again, it's going to be a choke point between all of those ships coming and our ability to load them and get them back out. And if you remember the statement Trump made last night, he said, we're going to get you a quick turnaround time. I think that was the last sentence in last night's Truth Social statement. But think about what I'm saying. I don't want to make this long and drawn out. But so right now, what we're going to see is the blockade coming. We got four big carriers. We got a couple carriers and other battle groups. I think there's 4 main groups that are now plowing that way if they're not already there. And I think they've made a couple other dare you transits. But they're building up that power to control the straits. Maybe not just to control the people that are trying to get out of there and pay with the Chinese currency, but he may want to control it all. And he has mentioned, if you paid attention, he says if they're going to charge tolls, maybe we should get the toll money because we're the ones that are trying to clean up this mess. And so think about that. That would pay for some of the military that's going to have to be there. And now we're seeing some input from other nations that may come in to help. But they're kind of like all talk. You know, they don't have what it takes. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to have that conflict. Trump could put like a low tariff on everybody. Nothing can be paid unless it's petrodollar or gold, something like that, silver, whatever, probably gold, which can be transferred into any currency or used as backup against any currency. The whole world takes gold. We may see something like that. And even the nations that are on the eastern side of the Persian Gulf, Saudi and UAE and these people, will pay some type of tariff to open the straits. So and if they don't, there won't be much business. Now, from what I understand, also looking at the marine traffic map that we often use, there's still a bunch of ships up in the Persian Gulf that are trapped. In other words, their owners are afraid of mines, or their insurance companies won't agree with, but they're afraid to make the move yet. So there's a lot of people that are about to have to come out of that area into a U.S. blockade. Again, as a businessman and as a business move, especially when the world is getting into crumbling economic situations, and every nation is trying to find some way to get out of it. Most of them are trying to scam their way out of it. But we're seeing master moves. And it would help, I think, if a little more information came out. Just Trump straight up with them, we're going to do this, we're going to do that and all, but it wouldn't hurt to be a little more straight up with us. I know he doesn't do that because there's too many leaks in the mafia media. But again, it would be nice that way it would give us the people, in other words, he would avoid a lot of negative press, not just from mainstream media, but for people like me and you that are saying, look, guys, it's kind of getting a little difficult to understand the situation over there right now. It looks like Israel is controlling it, things like that, remember? And then we saw Israel and the U.S. start to have some problems. Now, from what I understand, there were a couple of missiles fired back and forth between the Houthis and northern Israel, Hezbollah in Lebanon and northern Israel. Haven't seen a lot of information coming out of there yet. But that was not part of the ceasefire deal, according to the U.S. and Israel. Now, another thing, this is going to happen very quickly. It possibly is happening as we speak, because Trump said he announced that the U.S. Navy will immediately, in these words, begin a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz to prevent ships from paying illegal tolls to Iran, further raising tensions. These illegal tolls would probably be fine if they were in the U.S. petrodollar or gold. But they're not. What they're doing is it's Chinese influence into Iran to build their currency up, because they are in an economic bind themselves because of their Belt and Silk Road initiatives, things like that, building out other nations' infrastructure so that they can basically take over. And so that now all of that's come home to them, and they're in a financial bind. So more and more pressure is going to come on the other countries to move into that area, into the Chinese money and the digital money. Now, the one thing I could say is that since the U.S., and rightly so, is afraid to lose the power of the petrodollar for obvious reasons, again, economic chaos, the inability to pay back loans, and the power loss. But if things are moved into a digital currency, then that would probably quickly combine into a one world currency. You understand? As a means of making a peaceful movement in these end times. And that's kind of what I'm seeing. And if you think about it, if I was Trump, I would try to move everything into gold. Now, China in the last few years has been stocking up way more gold than anybody else in the world combined. That may be why their economics are a little messed up right now, because they have a large stock of gold, but you have to convert that, and other things. But they're stocking up for the long term. So if you were stuck behind the petrodollar, in other words, it gives you power, but you're already stuck into a debt cycle that really can't be bought out under the current situation. Then something moving into gold or something like that would be a way for the U.S. to get out from under the petrodollar, pay off the debts, and things like that. But who knows if that will happen, because it's a trap on both sides. The petrodollar is any type of petro-tied currency is a trap if it's going in the way the petrodollar did. In other words, we pay debt with the petrodollars. And oil trades and things like that. But it's not balanced out, and we're so far behind, and we're getting trillions of dollars behind every week because of the high interest rates. Something's going to break. And it would make sense to try to come out from under that without losing the money. In other words, convert it as much as you could for the oil into gold and start trading oil to gold, oil to oil, whatever it is. Get away from the printed fake currency. All nations would be better off. But right now, it is a battle. And so as we look at this conflict, which again, as we speak, they could be blocking the straits, the new battleships, new armament, fully loaded, and the tolls are beginning. But if you think about it, the other ships, I think there's 300 or 400, like I said, maybe way more than that. I was trying to look at the map, that are afraid to come out. Even a small toll on those guys in petrol trading and petrodollars would be much better for them, because they're losing up to $1 million a day sitting there. So the U.S. is going to get another shortfall, it looks like, from the immediate toll fares. Now, that's going to become a conflict. Why? Because China is going to push against it so hard behind the scenes. And they control California, they control the Democrats, and they control the mainstream media's current message. And that is, Iran has won this war. Trump is defeated. They are, again, they're trying to carry the load for the defeated regime. Why? Because China controls them. The Democrats are the proxy army in the U.S. for China. Just the way it is. And that needs to be addressed by the president, and something needs to be done about it. I've said it for years. They're the #1 domestic terrorism organization on the planet. Not just here. You think about the other wars. You think about McCain and ISIS. Sickening. But we don't know what's going to happen. I just wanted to come in and update you with a little bit of information. And I want to hear what you think in the comments. You don't have to be pro-Trump or anti-Trump or anything like that. I'd like for the conversation to go to be with, to go something like, how will it work out with the tolls, how, the petrodollar versus the Petro One, all of that, and what kind of conflict and all. You don't have to come in here and immediately troll the U.S. and Trump. Just come in, you know, like a decent human being in a decent conversation, just like you walk into a man's house. You're not going to come in there just raising hell and expect to have a friendly welcome. That's not how it works, not in Mississippi anyway. You quickly, an ambulance is leaving with your unconscious body down the driveway around here. And then if we want to have a conversation when you wake up and heal, we can do that. But it's not, fortunately for you guys that do that on a constant basis, you're on the other side of the web. So my point in that, I know that's bold, but I'm an old crazy redneck, and that has happened a few times in my life. Anyway, not trying to do that. What I'm trying to do is get you to be an adult and contribute to the conversation. More heads are better than one. We can look through the comments that are trying to be constructive and maybe get a little better grip on what's happening. But I think this video, along with the one last night, not because of me, but because of the information, are two of the most important. And I've seen some people now that are pretty big channels on YouTube that have picked up on what we talked about yesterday evening, about the empty ships coming in and things like that. And so the world's waking up. Let's work constructively to keep that happening, because somebody's going to ring a bell in one of these conversations that point just a little deeper into the truth. But I think we're getting there. Anyway, guys, it's a heads up. Be safe.